Hi, Beverly. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How
Fill
about
one
you?
out, fill one out for each item.
Okay. Are you ready?
Good evening, Mr. Reynolds.
But
The voting item is 280. Is the speaker on outside? Should be. Okay,
Good evening. Welcome to everyone who's decided to attend in person. This is a special meeting of the City of St. Augustine Beach to consider a resolution for mandatory face coverings. If you'll all rise, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The city clerk, please call the roll.
yes, ma'am. Mayor England,
Here.
Vice Mayor Casca,
Here.
Commissioner George,
Here.
Commissioner Rumwell,
Here.
Commissioner Samora.
Here.
This meeting is held with waiving the requirement for our commissioners to be in person. So two of the commissioners are attending via electronic means, Commissioner George and Commissioner Rumwell. The first thing of order is to discuss the need for an emergency meeting. And I just have a few remarks on the need for an emergency is because of the recent increase in the positive cases of the coronavirus or COVID-19. In addition to the daily increase of cases across the state from 667 in June 1 to over 5,000 in many cases this month, and yesterday the daily increase was 6,563 new cases. Our 32080 zip code has increased in total from 12 cases in early June to 65 yesterday. That's more than a 500% increase in a month. There can be no dispute that this is a significant increase in community spread in our small community of 2.5 square miles. And we should take up tonight what measures can be taken to reduce the spread of the, before the July 4th weekend. So I will, before I make a motion to approve calling the special meeting, is there any commissioners that have a question?
No, but I do have a public comment card.
I think we will be taking public comment on the resolution.
Correct. This is for item number 4, which is for the call to determine if the meeting is an emergency.
Would our attorney, before we have never called for public comment on just the fact of the meeting itself. Is that necessary for a special meeting?
I would allow it out of the abundance of caution. I don't think it's worth not doing it.
Okay, all right, well, go ahead.
Mr. Tom Reynolds?
He's out being interviewed by the TV.
Tom Reynolds, 50 Brigantine Court. This is over just for the call for the emergency meeting? Is that what this is?
Yes,
Okay.
before we take a vote on that.
Okay, I'm only for calling for an emergency meeting if it's for the commission to send an emergency letter to Mayor Lenny Curry and Governor DeSantis canceling the REC convention. I consider that an emergency. I also would like you to call an emergency meeting if you're going to call an emergency meeting for hazmat pay for the police officers. The ones that have to pull people over, they don't know if they've got the COVID, they've got to ask them for license, registration, insurance, might have to search them, might have to arrest them. I would like to have an emergency meeting for hazmat pay. But as far as calling for an emergency meeting for mask, I can't see that. If there's a city commission and the city employees don't want anybody in this building unless they have a mask, I'm okay with that. Regulate city property, I wouldn't call it an emergency meeting, I'd put a sign out. Private business needs to regulate themselves. As we all know, Mayor Tracy Upchurch overstepped his boundary. Now he's got another lawsuit, trying to regulate businesses, telling people what to do. Private business and government are separate. Yes, we all want safety, and we all want to get through this. But overreaching, regulating businesses, telling any business on the strip, telling people they need to wear a mask in public is wrong. So tonight, if that's all this emergency is about, I ask the commission to vote no. But if you can have an emergency meeting for hazmat pay, yes. You can have an emergency meeting to send Mayor Lenny Curry a letter, Governor DeSantis, demanding they cancel the RNC convention. Some of the worst. You folks will have to look past the letter at the end of your name, because all 5 of you are Republicans, and sometimes it takes a little courage to go up against the party. So that's what I'm going to be looking for tonight. Hold an emergency meeting. Let's let Lenny Curry and Governor DeSantis know it's very foolish to bring the RNC anywhere near us. Thank you very much.
Any further public comment on just this, whether to approve this?
No other public comment.
All right. Well, then, if there's no questions from the commissioners, then I will make a motion to approve the emergency meeting, and I'm looking for a second.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Koska,
No.
Commissioner George,
Yes.
Commissioner Rumwell,
Yes.
and Commissioner Samora.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
All right, thank you, commissioners. Just to give the commissioners an idea of with the agenda, how we're going to proceed tonight, we will start with a guest that is here for your convenience, from a representative from Flagler Hospital. Then I'll go to our attorneys to lay out the legal authority and some of the issues we face in passing this resolution from a legal point of view. You all received a memo about the research they have performed and the reasons why we will need the county to approve the resolution if it passes. Then I am the presenter of this resolution. I'll make some comments. We'll open it up to public comment at that point, and then we'll close public comment and open it up for your discussion, and then we will take a vote. So is there any questions on how we will proceed? And the reason we're going to have the representative from Flagler Hospital here first is she's on a timeline and has to leave for another appointment. So if no further questions, I will call Ms. Pulfas, and she is the Chief Clinical Officer at Flagler Hospital. She's here for a few remarks and to allow you to ask questions. Thank you. Thank you for being here so much.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name's Nancy Pulfas. I'm a nurse. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer with Flagler Health Plus, Flagler Hospital. And I'm here to offer a perspective of masking. COVID-19 transmission is strongly correlated with the duration and intensity of contact. The risk of transmission among household members can be as high as 40%, whereas the risk of transmission from less intense and less sustained encounters is below 5%. The findings Also, born out of the recent research associating mask wearing with less transmission of COVID-19, particularly in closed settings. Physicians recently published in the NEJM, New England Journal of Medicine, strongly support the calls of public health agencies for all people to wear masks when circumstances compel them to be within 6 feet of each other for sustained periods. Now, the CDC defines sustained periods as 15 minutes or greater. I think it is also important to share some statistics that we have seen in Flagler Hospital. Very often we see what's happening in the county and in Florida proper, but let me share with you what we have been seeing as far as hospitalizations. We had our first case in March, mid-March this year, and we had a total of 8 patients who were inpatients for the month of March. In April, we took care of 7 patients that required hospitalization. In May, it was down to 3. Now in June, we've seen a significant uptick. We've had over 23 patients requiring hospitalization. Out of those, very small amount do require ventilator support, which is good news. And I can tell you that we are actually seeing that the length of stay is less, the severity level is less, but it's also hitting a different age population than what we saw in the beginning in the spring. So I also want to share with you what we're doing at Flagler Hospital. Now, of course, it's a healthcare institution, and we're taking care of sick patients. We have, from the very beginning, stood up an incident command team. And this team are the ones making the decisions moving forward during the pandemic, just as we would for any natural disaster. We have decided to require masking for anyone coming into our doors seeking care, including in our MOB or our physician's offices. Now again, we are taking care of those who are vulnerable. It is our responsibility to protect. So that's what we're doing in the hospital. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, I'll open it up for the commissioners. I'll call on you on the telephone first. Commissioner George, any questions?
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if the speaker could respond to some of the articles, such as that published by Association of American Physicians and Surgeons that seem to indicate that there's no benefit to wearing a face covering in public for reducing the spread of the virus.
I do appreciate that question, Commissioner. I can't make a comment for an article I haven't read.
Okay, so then just to be more direct, is it your professional opinion that face coverings do reduce the threat of the spread of the virus?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Rumwell?
Let me add him in real quick. He got kicked out of the Zoom meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll go to Commissioner Samora.
Yes, are you in a position where you could comment on the capacity of Flagler Hospital to take incoming COVID patients?
Oh, sure. So we did prepare in early spring when the predictive models had us soaring with well close to 100 patients at a critical care level of care vent support. We're equipped to take over 75 patients at a critical care level, as well as with vent support. We've not had more than 3 patients on vents that were COVID positive patients at any given time.
Okay. And what is the occupancy of those beds at the current time?
Currently,
Currently, are we 50%
what do we have
full?
in-house?
Yeah.
So currently, the last count, now it's fluid, you can imagine, we had 18.
Okay.
Of those 18, 8 are critical care level. 8. So we in the very beginning, we watched very closely the county statistics. And even in phase 2, we continued to monitor, I did personally as the incident commander, and really watched the flu-like symptoms that were presenting into our emergency department. And decided to hold. So we've limited visitation, continued with masking, et cetera, and kept one floor, one area specifically for COVID, or what we call PUI, which is patients under investigation. We have not ever come close to having to leave our units specific for COVID, which is good news.
Good.
We're seeing that patients coming into the emergency department that tested in the community, or we tested them ourselves, the majority are well enough to go home. They're not sick enough to require hospitalization.
So they're symptomatic, but they're well enough to go home.
That's right. I think a lot of people are scared.
Excellent. No further questions at this time.
All right. Commissioner Rumwell, are you back with us? Any questions?
I am. I have no questions.
All right. Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here. Greatly appreciated. Could you speak to the different kinds of face coverings? There seems to be a lot of controversy over cloth face coverings not being adequate because of the particle size of the virus and it offering not as much protection as face coverings that you would wear in the hospital, which are actually not available for public use. Could you speak a little to that?
Yeah, I can't make comment on the type of mask that are recommended. I can tell you that Dr. Ollicott spoke at the county commission meeting, and she talked about the benefits of even a cloth. So any facial covering is beneficial.
Okay. And how many of the patients are currently on ventilators?
Currently, we have one.
Okay. And can you speak a little bit about the current testing availability?
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? So right before coming into this meeting, I was on the phone planning with the county as well as my team. So currently, testing is available. So our lab on 312 offers testing. We also have Care Fast, which is our urgent care on the campus of Flagler. We offer testing there. And of course, if you come and seek services with us, we test that there as well. We are looking to actually stand our tent back up. We had a tent for quite some time in the spring, and then when we saw in May that the numbers were starting to abate, we decided to pull back. Now with the potential resurgence, we are looking as of starting Wednesday of next week to start testing again on campus.
Okay, thank you so much. They also had free drive-through testing available for a couple of weeks over at the Department of Health. And then that kind of went away, I guess, with the comfort level that we were all experiencing at the time. Are any of those testing sites available to the public for free, or is there a cost involved?
I can't comment on that. The ones that we would offer, there could be a cost, and that's specifically because you're seeking care other than just testing.
Sure.
So if you're coming into urgent care, you're going to be seeking care of a practitioner, and then of course the lab test is added on to that. If you're going to 312, you're specifically coming with a physician's order or a practitioner's order for testing.
Okay. And currently, would you say that we are at the highest levels that we have experienced since the beginning of measuring COVID?
I can comment on what we're seeing in the hospital, and definitely we are seeing higher numbers than what we saw in any previous month.
Okay, and I just lost my train of thought. I apologize.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that's it for now. Thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
I just have one question, in that with the rise in the number of daily cases and increase in cases, positive testing, do we have, what kind of sources do we have for contact tracing? Do we have sufficient to help reduce the spread? With the high incident level, do we have enough contact tracing?
So the Department of Health might be better to answer that question. I can share with you, however, Flagler, we've developed a mechanism, it's an app to help with contact tracing. Specifically for this. It's called the Helpfully app. There are several businesses in town and actually out of state that will be using our app, and it helps with contact tracing real time. It also helps with symptom trackers on employees, so they can attest to whether or not they're having symptoms, and if they are, they can immediately go to a virtual visit with a physician or a practitioner to determine whether or not they should be tested. So much less manual process. You can imagine how difficult it is to do contact tracing on hundreds of people, particularly when someone might be ill and very nervous. I can't remember who I was around. I don't remember who was within 6 feet of me and for how long. So this app really helps with that, and I'd be happy to share that information with anyone after the meeting.
And as the number of cases increase, the more difficulty it will be to keep up with the contact tracing, correct?
Oh, I would imagine.
Yes, okay, all right. Thank you then, if you would like to stay around for a few more minutes.
I just remembered my last
Okay,
question.
all
I wrote
right,
it down so
all
I wouldn't
right.
forget. Thank you. I appreciate you giving me a replay. Have we ever reached, or are we close to reaching the full capacity of our facilities and the availability of PPE equipment?
No. That's really good news.
Yes,
so
it
the
is very good
PPE,
news.
yes. So we planned for the worst and we hoped for the best. Definitely with PPE, it was a concern, but at Flagler Health, we've never had an issue running short or out of any PPE, and we're in very good position at the moment.
Wonderful.
And
Thank
we've
you.
never even neared capacity as far as caring for this pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for helping
My
us out
pleasure.
and answering some questions. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Happy 4th, everyone.
Thank you.
Before I go further, I just want to let the people know who attended here in person for public comment. We will be accepting public comment in a few minutes. Your comment will be limited to 2 minutes, and we're going to ask you to be as courteous as possible. I realize that there are differences of opinion, and we need to respect each other's opinion and be courteous. I'm going to ask we also received a lot of email and the commissioners have read a lot of email, and I'm going to ask our city clerk to give us the recent count up till 5 p.m. and this is a count of the emails that we have received in favor of or against the resolution.
I believe it's 77 for face masks and 11 no's.
Okay, and we will continue to keep count of that, but there does seem to be an overwhelming positive response to the resolution we are going to be discussing tonight. And so then I would ask our attorneys to give us, Mr. Taylor, if you'll give us just a summary of the legal background, and although the commissioners received your memo, if you'll just summarize for the public where we stand on our authority to issue such a resolution.
Okay. There are 2 primary legal issues that we're addressing here tonight. One is whether or not the city of St. Augustine Beach can even adopt and enact emergency orders by resolution. The second question is whether or not this type of emergency orders, are they constitutional? I'll start with the question of whether or not the city can actually issue emergency orders. We have some interesting and some of the best laws in the country for emergency management. It's one of the reasons that Florida is fairly well respected, is because we have some very tight requirements for our emergency management professionals that we have across the state. And in those, when we look at our charter, we have adopted and have been granted by state law all the powers of a municipality. And one of the primary powers of a municipality is to be able to issue emergency orders. However, by statute, we have requested that our municipalities defer to the county in situations where they do not have an emergency management person. Well, they've got to comply with a whole chapter of statutes, but basically it takes a full-time employee to do all the requirements to stay involved. And there's a reason for that, is that the state of Florida primarily is focused on hurricanes when it thinks about its emergency management relief. And so all the statutes talk about things that you would see in a hurricane situation. Many of the pieces of them are explicitly for that. And in the statutes, in Chapter 252, there's one explicitly that says that you have to basically have an emergency management director. To be concise, because of the size and the budgets of the city of St. Augustine Beach, we have chosen not to do that. And I think that I won't give any preferences one way or the other, but that makes some level of sense, because you don't want to necessarily have a full-time employee when the county is doing a very good job and the state is doing a very good job for hurricanes. This is a novel issue because in this emergency, we're certainly in an emergency. We've got people around at every level of government. They've declared an emergency. We declare an emergency at the beginning of every meeting. The president has done it, the governor has done it, the county has done it, so we're clearly under an emergency. But yet, in this emergency, unlike many of the hurricanes and other emergencies you might see, we still have access to newspapers, telephones, the internet, TVs. So everybody knows what's going on. We're still able to have this meeting, and we have two commissioners that are not in the room, but they're able to be involved and see everything that's going on. And that's approved by executive order. So in other words, we have some conflicting statutes with our charter, which is also by Florida law, so they conflict. I cannot tell you at 100% whether or not the city of St. Augustine Beach has the power to enact emergency orders. I can say in good faith that I would go to any court of law and argue that we should, especially in this novel situation where, the governor has basically told us to keep having meetings, and we're set up to have emergency meetings. We have procedures to call emergency meetings. So I think that we've got strong arguments for that. I cannot say that if we were legally challenged that we would 100% win, because there is a Florida statute that basically says we're supposed to have an emergency management professional in order to be able to pass those. So it's not clear under the law. My remedy for that would be that the county actually does have the ability to pass emergency orders. And so if this body were to pass something tonight by resolution, we would then ask that the county ratify it. Now, we're supposed to coordinate, by statute, we're supposed to coordinate with the county anyway. So it's a requirement that they would be involved. The standard that they are setting for the entire county is very different than what they would set for us. And if the city of St. Augustine Beach and their elected officials decide tonight that they want an emergency order regarding facial coverings, I think they should listen to it, think about it very wholeheartedly, and think about whether that's a good idea to do it. Much like the governor has made orders for the entire state, but has let separate counties decide by county which ones they want to go. And so I would hope that even if the county doesn't want to adopt a facial covering emergency order, that they would respect the fact that the elected officials here that are closest to the people have voted for that. And I think that is a strong argument, and I think that that's one that you could feel comfortable moving forward. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying you won't get a legal challenge. I'm just saying you could feel comfortable if you decide you want to move forward that you could. The second question that's been asked to me is whether or not these types of things are constitutional. When we're making orders and we're saying that somebody can't, we can't keep people from wearing a mask. The test for that, the strongest test that we have in legal government, and I'm not going to say that this is the standard that would be put on this, is strict scrutiny, and that's the highest test. When we look at case law and we're looking at all the things that go before the Supreme Court, the highest and strongest test they give is strict scrutiny. They say, is this something that is got a captivating interest and is it a primary interest, forgetting the exact words, but the test is basically that. And then they ask, whether or not you're using the narrowest tailored legislation to accomplish the task. So so by going through that analysis, health and protection of health is a high regarded, so I do think we'll meet the burdens of that first part of the test without question. There's some small questions in my mind of whether or not this would fall into narrowly tailored, but the inconvenience to people to have to wear masks is relatively small. There's a considerable number of exceptions that have been placed into this particular resolution, and I would feel very comfortable that if you decide to do this, that this is constitutional. I will say this, that across the state, there are legal challenges that are being placed so that we can assume that this will be. Most likely, those challenges will be consolidated into 1 or 2 lawsuits, and we wouldn't have to represent it here, but I can't guarantee that either. And with that, I'll open up to questions if anybody has one.
For the commissioners on the phone, questions. Commissioner George.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so if we were to proceed with any decisions tonight, would we have to be utilizing this structure of what you've referred to as an emergency order? Why could we not use a resolution or something that we have historically utilized to act at emergency meetings? Why are you guiding us down the path of something that you think is unsure? Don't we have another vehicle available?
Commissioner, we don't have another vehicle if we want to actually put any enforcement into it. It needs to be an emergency order because it would be more properly and probably an ordinance in normal times. I would feel uncomfortable trying to do any of that by just a regular resolution. I do think that it is an emergency power.
Okay, that makes sense. The enforcement mechanism, I get what you're saying there. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, Commissioner George?
I'm sorry, Mayor. No, that's no further questions at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rumwell, questions for our city attorney?
The question I have is that, thank you, Mayor. How is the enforcement side of it? What's our legal right to have the enforcement? And if we were to enforce it, how is that kind of structured to where we can even enforce it?
Legally speaking, there should be no problems with the enforcement, so to speak, but logistically, there's considerable problems because while I certainly think that the police department could issue these civil citations, and I also think that code enforcement could issue these citations, I think that none of those departments are exactly set up for this kind of thing, so I do think there's some implementation problems and issues. But legally speaking, the city has the ability to issue civil citations. We issue civil citations for any number of things, so the fundamental legals behind it being enforceable are there. The mechanics of how you would enforce it are issues that I really can't speak to and don't know how easy those would be for our staff to implement.
Mr. Taylor, if I could step in, the intent, the resolution it's not a criminal offense.
Oh, absolutely not.
It is civil, and our first line of defense would be the business by posting the sign that masks are required, and by maybe offering a free mask if someone forgets theirs or left it in the car or whatever. And then if a person still barges in and the business decides to let them in, it would be up to the business to perhaps identify the person who refuses to comply, and then that identity could be turned into our code enforcement. So that is the plan that I have discussed with the city manager, and it's not that enforcement isn't the major point. of the resolution. The major point is to help reduce the spread of new cases. And we're not going to, hopefully we're not going to be making a decision based on enforcement, letting the tail wag the dog, so to speak. That's not the purpose of this. And so enforcement, it's just like enforcing texting while driving. It's not going to be something that you're going to depend on 100% enforcement.
The other thing, I'm not 100%, I know that as of last week, the Duval County Sheriff's Office hadn't enforced at all any of the executive orders. They were able to gain compliance simply by talking with people, letting them know what the executive orders were, and enforcing any disruptive things with other parts of the criminal code. So that also is an option that I would hope we would employ here in the city, at least as an option A and B.
Okay. Commissioner Rumwell, any further questions, please, go ahead.
Yep, and so say the county doesn't ratify our emergency order. That makes this law then a moot point. Am I correct with that?
It weakens, it puts a legal question behind anything that we adopt, and until it's resolved in court, it isn't under any sort of concrete, has no foundation. So until it's challenged, what we adopt tonight will be the law. If somebody does challenge it, then it has a greater chance to not be enforceable than if the county were to adopt it. I do not think there would be any real serious challenges if the county also adopts it on that mechanism. But if the county chooses not to ratify it, we still have some plenary powers as a city, and until there's a legal decision, I don't know that it would be, it is not certain by any stretch. I cannot tell you what a court of law will do in that situation. But it's not groundless, and the default is whatever you guys pass tonight, not until it's challenged and broken. So it would have the effect of law until it's challenged.
Effective tonight, if it passes, effective tonight, and then if the county does not approve, we would gather together to discuss our next steps.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Anything else, Commissioner?
That was my only other question. That was the other question I had, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay,
Is that
all
if
right.
we enact it today, doesn't the county still have to ratify it before it becomes law?
And the answer to that is it doesn't have to, but as soon as if the county will ratify it, you're on very strong footing, and there's very little legal challenge to that first question that I had, and so we'd be in really good shape. If the county will not ratify it, then it puts us in a little bit of a legal limbo. But since we have done something, what we have done is presumed legal until it is actually challenged in a court of law, if that makes sense.
Yep, that does. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Not at this moment. I'll have some as we proceed. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Samora.
Just follow up on the ratification by the county. Would that be something done by the county administrator, or would that require a vote of the entire board?
My understanding is the county administrator has the power to do that if he wanted to. Politically speaking, he may want to defer. The county administrator could make that ratification and make it effective only until the next county commission meeting, and then ask the county commission to do it. So he would have some leeway. He could do either any of those things.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
All right. Since, before we go to public comment, since I'm going to be the presenter of this resolution, and I'm going to just say a few remarks here for the commissioners, and then we'll have public comment and then discussions. So I am bringing this before you because I've become increasingly alarmed at the rising number of daily positive cases of the virus and total number of cases in the state, the county, and our particular zip code, 32080. You cannot dispute the fact that there has been a substantial community spread in our area. We are a small community, but we attract substantial visitors, and therefore it's our duty to do everything we can to minimize and stabilize the spread of this disease. We don't want anyone to get sick. Our community is uniquely linked to the city of St. Augustine, more than the county in general. The visitors tend to frequent both places, our hotels, the beach, the retail, and our restaurants. Therefore, it makes sense to have some similar rules in both the city of St. Augustine and St. Augustine Beach. We are a small city, a small jurisdiction, 2.5 square miles, and people within our jurisdiction, within our city, frequent the same places, and so do our visitors. For example, our Publix is one of the most popular and heavily frequented grocery stores for Publix in the state. And I have received many email and text about the fact that a week ago there were very few people in Publix wearing the face mask or following the signs for which way to go up and down the aisles. Lately, within the last few days and after I talked to the city, to the manager, assistant manager of Publix, they have increasingly encouraged the use of the face mask. So it is important that our residents feel that we are taking all the steps we can within our jurisdictions to minimize the increasing spread of the virus. The CDC has increasingly put out statements stressing the importance of the components to stop the spread. And those components, all of them are important to work together. Staying home, social distancing, washing your hands, and wearing the face mask. There have been many recommendations from authorities that wearing the face mask is helpful. And for those who say, well, it's not helpful, or no one is expecting 100% guarantee. But there have been plenty of authorities that have said wearing a simple cloth mask helps reduce. Anything we can do as leaders in our community to help reduce the increase in daily cases of and help prevent people from getting sick with this disease is something that I believe we should do. I also want to talk about the exceptions that we've put in the resolution. We've carefully crafted this resolution to allow for exceptions for people who have some medical issues that would make wearing the mask intolerable. And I've also even asked our attorney to put some language in there for our restaurants back in the kitchen where it's hot, excessive heat. There's an exception there for business owners to make it more comfortable for workers. Although the resolution would require customers who are coming into a business or servers, wait staff who are waiting on customers to greet each other initially wearing a mask. But read the exceptions in this resolution carefully, commissioners, because we carefully crafted and put exceptions in there where we could for reasonableness. We've already talked about enforcement, and it is not our intent to require our police agency to enforce this. It is the business is the first line of defense, and from there the business can decide whether to file a complaint with our code enforcement about any individual who refuses to comply or becomes a nuisance. So for those who claim it is outside the Constitution or we don't have the right to pass such a resolution, I would say that since this is a matter of health and safety for our community, that it is within our authority to take and consider the health and safety of our whole community and the visitors who come to see us. There are many instances of municipalities and governments having the right to pass a mandatory requirement like not smoking indoors. I remember the 80s when that came out, and wearing seat belts, and now texting while driving. So for the health and safety of the community, I believe there is substantial authority and hope that we will get used to a temporary inconvenience, a temporary resolution that will help keep our community safe until such time we can stabilize and reduce the number of daily incidences of new cases. So this is not meant to be a permanent resolution or permanent requirement. It's to get us to a point where we are reducing the number of daily cases. And finally, I want to address, yes, the deaths are stable. Thank goodness deaths are stable. Hospitalizations, there's room. It's stable. But the number of cases, new infections are increasing. That's what we want to stop. That's what we want to minimize so that down the road, hospitalizations and deaths do not increase. So this isn't about, well, we've got only so many deaths, or we got plenty of hospital room. It is about minimizing the spread within our community. That's the whole purpose of asking people to comply with the recommendations of so many authorities, that wearing a face mask helps to prevent the spread. And if we can't get people to voluntarily comply, well, then we may have to go to stronger measures, and that's what I feel we need to do tonight. So with that, I will turn it over for public comment.
Nangela Postus?
One that spoke.
Oh, right, from Flagler Health, right. Thank you. Mr. Tom Reynolds?
Tom Reynolds, 50 Brigantine Court. I would urge you to vote no. There's already enough laws, regulations, mandates. Interfering with private business is not your job. I've heard all the talk. I want to remind this commission of the lawsuit down there. But most of all, listening. $6,000 a month contracted attorney has no answer? The mayor, been here 6 years, an attorney, doesn't know. Undine Pulowski Celeste George, 10 years, been here, an attorney, and no one knows the answer to the emergency meeting questions. Amazing. I mean, just, if that wasn't a Twilight Zone moment, I don't know what is. How do you not know? But let's go a step further. The old city. Who brought that forward? Mayor Upchurch. Ku Klux Klan Upchurch, who's so overwhelmed with guilt right now, he doesn't know what to do. He wants to change the subject of the monument. So I ask this commission, go with the 3 smart commissioners. That would be Jimmy Johns, Jeb Smith, and who else? Paul Waldron. And who brought it up? The two lawyers, Jeremiah Blocker and Henry Dean, the ones who broke state law, federal law, and the county ordinance. Lawyers on a commission. So vote no, and really re-examine the contracted attorney for $6,000 a month. What a waste of money.
Jocelyn Soto?
Hi, my name is Jocelyn Soto. I'm a physician at Flagler Hospital. I don't represent Flagler Hospital. I don't represent my employer, First City Hospitalist Group.
Excuse me, Ms. Soto, can you give your address, please? for the
Sure.
record?
354 Ocean Forest Drive.
Thank you.
My job is, I'm internal medicine trained with a fellowship in geriatric medicine. My job is as a hospitalist. I work exclusively in the hospital. I would take the place of your primary care physician, or if you didn't have one, after you've come through the emergency room, we're the ones that write your admission orders, follow you throughout, and discharge you when you're going home. So I heard Nanji giving you some information. She's a much better speaker than I am, but I can tell you in the last 5 days, our COVID hospitalizations have increased from our nice little level of 2 to 3 to 20 a day, and we are humping, taking care of those people and getting them discharged to a safe environment. The problem is that everybody else is getting sick too. So we have, our MICU is dedicated to COVID patients, so now we're down to one ICU. The SICU, which has overflowed into the cardiovascular unit. We have a dedicated COVID unit on the first floor. That's my time limit, is that a time limit? 12 beds in the COVID unit and 12 beds in the ICU. So there's 24 patients who are COVID positive or persons of interest. We are humping. If people plan to have their heart attacks and their blood clots and the regular old pneumonias and everything else that brings them to the hospital, you may find it a little, we're taking care
If you could
of.
summarize and tell us how you feel about this resolution?
We're keeping our nose above water right now at the hospital.
Okay,
This will help. We know this.
thank you.
I've gone to Publix, it's like Christmas, the day before Christmas. No distancing, no masks, people from all over the place. I just drove past Ted's. I thought bars were closed.
Thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Arm to arm to arm to arm. So if this helps, is there a downside to it that doesn't involve politics? I'd like to know.
All right. Thank you so much for coming. That's helpful. Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I have no other speaker cards.
We have no one else that wants to come speak on this?
I wouldn't. I don't have a part. I've never done this before, so I did it.
That's quite all right.
Okay.
Everyone has a first time.
I
You
did
could-
the sitting, and that was scary.
If you would please fill out a speaker card when you're finished.
Okay, I will.
And when you step up to the mic, if you could please state your name and your address.
Okay, I will. Hi, my name is Janine Rainville. I live at 10 Coquina Boulevard.
Sorry.
Okay to go?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I've been a registered nurse for 32 years. I've never seen anything like this. You can ask my husband. I come home pretty stressed out every day. Life is rough. I've been in this community for many, many, many years. I started a walking campaign because I went to Publix one day, and I was mortified. I was scared. Our governor wrote a state recovery plan, and in that plan is to help the most vulnerable and the healthcare workers. And me as a healthcare worker, I can't go to my local grocery store and feel safe. That's not protecting us at all. And wearing a mask is simple. So what I've started doing, I walk after work to get my frustrations out. And I carry signs and I walk all over the place. I started St. George Street. I commute to Jacksonville. Every time I'd pass St. George Street, I would really cry, seeing what I know what's happening down there, and people are just here vacationing, bringing it to us. So St. George Street was my first place that I would walk. No one had masks. After the mandate, I went back down there and started walking. 90% are wearing masks. I'm not asking the police to go out and arrest everyone that doesn't have a mask. I'm trying to decrease the transmission. So if we decrease the transmission, you're going to protect the most vulnerable, those that live in long-term care and assisted living. They can't even see their family. My day is filled with trying to help people get on Zoom with their loved ones, people that are dying that can't see their loved ones. And it's a simple thing to ask. And this is a public health crisis. This is not about, anyone would do it. Like, we got to wear seatbelts, right? Because it's protecting us. So that's all that this simple mask is doing, is protecting us. So I ask you all to please vote yes to protect the healthcare worker and the most vulnerable.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hester Longstreet.
Hester Longstreet, 11 13th Street. Thank you for considering yes for masks for this vote. Disappointed in the county commission. I sent all of you an email, and hopefully you all got it. And my friend works in South Florida, and I spoke with him about it, and I asked him to summarize for me exactly what he could, because I wanted to send you guys something, and that's exactly what he did for me. Because I felt very strongly about it. I wish I had done that for the county commission. Maybe I'll send that to them as well. There should be something that hurts their pocket, as far as I'm concerned, if they don't want to wear a mask. Give them a mask. If they don't have one, give them a mask, give them an incentive to wear a mask. 3 strikes, then you've got to dig in your pocket. Everybody should be given a chance to, if they don't have one, because you can forget one, or my husband loses his. We've gone through like half a dozen for him. But it's not a joke. It's really scary. I've already lost friends in South Florida. And the scary thing is it's evolving and mutating into something else now. So it's just like the 100-year thing, and it's coming around. So if everyone wants to stay safe, we just need to do this. New York is already down to 1%. And I know that we can do that too. All we need to do is work together. Thank you. And thank you for considering it.
Anyone else?
Anyone else would like to speak?
All right, then I will close for public comment, and commissioners, we'll open up for a discussion. I'll start again with the commissioners on the phone. Commissioner George, your questions, your comments?
Thank you, Mayor. I think your prior statements really hit the nail on the head here. The arguments against a provision like this, the one is that either it's an imperfect solution to meet the goal of complete prevention, but just because it's not 100% doesn't mean we still don't need that ratio reduction. If it can minimize the transmission some, and the expert testimony has indicated that it does, then I'm in favor of it. To the arguments that it's unconstitutional, I agree with what you said as well. I mean, we have requirements on seatbelts, we have requirements in the food industry that the health department has to, verify that the facilities have proper refrigeration, all kinds of other restrictions. I don't believe that under these circumstances, with the emergency pandemic situation we're in, this would be, an issue of unconstitutional action by the government. I feel as though our city attorney has a sufficient plan in place to manage, the possible argument regarding the question of the city authority. I feel like there's enough of an articulable and substantial basis behind our taking this action that we will not be putting the taxpayers in a high-risk situation of economics sufficient to offset the high benefit for the entirety of public health in implementing the measure. I understand the businesses are struggling, and I can appreciate that they see this as an additional burden that might jeopardize their road to recovery. But I feel like we need to think the long term here. If these numbers keep going up, and then we may likely be facing another shutdown, and the economic impact of that would be much worse than the fear of a nominal economic impact in the day-to-day operations because of a requirement to wear masks inside. I do appreciate that the data clearly shows that certain kinds of face coverings are better than others. So I would hope that the public would utilize good judgment in opting for a better quality face mask or shield. But I do believe that as the leaders of this government, it's imperative on us to act and to lead. And last argument to respond to, I believe the resolution as drafted does provide ADA compliance, especially where there is provision for the requirement embracing alternate materials, such as a face shield. I think it's been clearly shown that the face shield allows accommodation for certain disability concerns. So for all of those reasons, I think that the benefit here outweighs the possible negatives, and I'm in favor of protecting our public health. This is a minor public safety accommodation, so I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rumwell, your comments.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I believe everyone should wear a mask. I wear a mask, my family wears a mask. I believe that it's the right thing to do based on the evidence. However, I have a hard time with the enforcement side of things. And the reasoning for it, Mayor, is because if we implement something that A, may not be ratified by the county, that could be shot down and become a moot point anyways, are we back to square one? I think that we have to get the businesses on board and get them involved. I have a business now that is shut down from the state because of the mandate. However, I believe that people now are starting to put masks on and doing it because they see the transmission issues. They see what's happening. I can't put our law enforcement in that situation. I can't put our code enforcement. We have one person at code enforcement. And then if it becomes a civil fine or another type of fine, I think we're opening ourselves up for other opportunities, but I believe everybody should wear a mask. This has nothing to do with should we or should we not. I'm looking at it from the enforceability side of it as a city. I think there should be continuity with the city of St. Augustine and St. Augustine Beach. I believe that there's a lot of things that we should all work together on. However, we can implore it and put it into, make a law and make it mandatory for St. Augustine Beach, but I can go to Winn-Dixie across the street and they're in the county. And so how do we maintain what people are doing and what, so for me it becomes an enforceable issue that we really can't enforce, but I think that the businesses, they're the ones that can enforce it. They have the right now, no shoes, no shirt, no service. Well, they can say no shoes, no shirt, no mask. And so I'm having a hard time there making it a law. I think I would go door to door personally and tell businesses, hey, we highly implore you all to do it, but I think to give them the pressure of mandating it and giving other business pressures to mandating it, I think a lot of people are doing it on their own now. So I'm having a real struggle by making it a law, though I totally unequivocally agree that we all should wear masks.
So Commissioner Rumwell, if I may, the alternative side of that is that, and from talking with the city of St. Augustine and their experience with this, is that many of the businesses were absolutely, they agree, but they want the force of a law. They want something in back of them to say to their customers, the city has required me to do this. They're looking for that backing, their support. And what I envision for enforcement is that they will post a sign, just like you have someone at Publix that is wiping down the carts. They will, the business will decide to say to a person who tries to enter, do you have a face mask? If not, here's one. And it will be up to the business to do the enforcement. I do not anticipate that our police agency, our police officers will get involved at all. And then if you have someone who just insists, we don't want employees of a business to get in an altercation with an individual. That the business will then decide whether to allow the person entry into their business or not. They probably would, rather than an altercation. And then if the business gets the identity of the person and decides to make a complaint, then it can be turned over to our code enforcement to perhaps contact that person. Now, I realize the chances of all that happening are very slim, but the chance of compliance with people saying, oh, okay, give me the face mask, I'll put it on, because they're just running into Publix for 10 minutes. So don't let enforcement, the tail wag the dog for you. Because I do believe that you believe in wearing, that people should wear the face covering to protect the spread of this disease in our community.
Mayor, can I weigh in on?
Yes.
I think that's a very good point. I just wanted to point out, and I know that the whole commission has seen the resolution, but there is no pressure on the businesses to enforce this. And to your point, if a particular business does not want to, call somebody out or call law enforcement to enforce it, quite frankly, then the market can control it. But it does give a messaging, it gives the businesses the authority of saying, pointing to the sign and saying, no, this is the city regulation. I think your point is very well received, and I just want to highlight the fact that there's no liability whatsoever on any business with this resolution. Any liability or potential liability, because really that's what it is, it's potential liability of a civil infraction, is borne solely by any individual who chooses not to abide by the order. And to your point also about enforcement, and the question of whether there may or may not be a challenge, the city attorney has already pointed out, if somebody has not been cited with a violation, there's a real big legal question whether they would even have standing to challenge this order. Additionally, I want to just respond to Commissioner Rumwell's question about, question and assertion that this would be a moot power if not ratified by the county. I would say that's not quite what our city attorney said. In fact, he said he believes, and his memo emphasizes that the city has legal authority to take this action. If the county chooses not to ratify the action, that will not make it moot, per se. He said it would help our position if somebody chose to challenge it. Again, bear in mind, they would have to probably be somebody who had received a citation, okay? But that would not be, for sure, invalidating or making this action moot whatsoever. So I just wanted to point out those couple of points of clarification. Thank you.
Commissioner Rumwell, any further comments or questions, please feel free.
Sure, no, and I appreciate, again, I can't stress enough that I believe people should wear masks. I wear it, my family wears it, I think, though, to the point, Mayor, is without enforcement, it does not do anything more than give people false hope. Because there is no false hope. If no enforcement, there's false hope. And not only that, but if someone, look, you can't by law ask somebody if they have a HIPAA. If they say, I can't wear it, you have to let them in. You can't even let them not in. And so by not having any enforcement, by not having any type of measure in place, mechanism in place, every tourist that comes here could say, hey, I have a medical issue. And you can't stop them from going in your business. I believe that the business should be held more responsible for masks. If that's what they choose to do, that they have the right to do it. They are private property. And I'm a property rights person. I have a hard time with people with private property not making their own decisions. On top of that, I think it's another, in my opinion, it's a civic issue. If we make laws and regulations and we don't enforce those laws and regulations, then why are we making laws and regulations? And so I have a problem, again, on the enforcement side. I'm happily, personally, to go door to door to every business in St. Augustine Beach and tell them how important it is. Mangoes has done it. I've gone by the Beachcomber, they've done it. Other businesses here in St. Augustine Beach are already doing it. Publix has a sign out front that says mask on before you come in. And so my feeling in my gut is that people are going to not wear masks unless there's an enforceable violation for them. And we are not set up in our city to do that. Again, it has nothing to do with my beliefs, doesn't believe that I think everybody should, but we have no enforcement mechanism. Therefore, I don't see how we can mandate something without an enforcement side of it.
So to challenge you a little bit more, Commissioner, would you do nothing because you don't feel like there is sufficient enforcement? Or would you take a step to help support the businesses in giving them more shoring up, a reason to require the mask and for them to post the signs and to at least ask their customers to respect others and to use a face covering when social distancing is not possible? Would you do nothing?
Say that again?
So your biggest issue is that you think there's going to be lack of enforcement. But if by passing this resolution and that we can achieve a high percentage of compliance with individuals and employees who are at businesses and reduce substantially the increase in positive cases, if we can achieve that by passing this ordinance, even though the enforcement mechanism is not perfect, would you do nothing?
I think that people are going to wear masks regardless. I think the people who are wearing masks now are the ones that are going to wear
I got to ask the audience
regardless.
not to, and that wasn't what was happening at Publix. I have received plenty of text messages, phone calls about Publix, and people were not wearing the mask in Publix until they posted the sign, and then the compliance really increased. But Publix put the sign up in anticipation of our resolution.
Well, I think that every business has the right, Mayor, to do that, and I support that. I implore them to do it. I'm asking them to do it. And so I think, to me, Mayor, it's just, if we don't ratify it within the county, it becomes, I still believe that we have a harder argument. And then second of all, again, we have businesses now that are doing it at the beach, and I think we still encourage them. So my recommendation is that we put out a message that says St. Augustine Beach would implore businesses, visitors, and residents to wear masks. And I think that's the same thing that we're trying to accomplish by having a resolution and a law, but we can't enforce it. So therefore, it's no different than, in my opinion, than a strong recommendation. That's all I have.
So I have to ask the people here not to comment, because this is the time for the commissioners to be able to talk between each other. So I appreciate your passion on this, but we got to let the commissioners work this out, and public comment is closed.
Mayor, this is Commissioner George again. May I make another comment?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody knows, I've been on this commission for like 9 years now. We have so many laws that do not get regularly enforced, period. That is part of government, always. This provision is not being presented as something which cannot be enforced. It's just a question of whether and when it might be enforced. Secondly, although most people are good-natured and want to, well, okay, maybe some people will challenge that statement. I'm an optimist. Let me roll back. Although a lot of people, yes, want to protect their health as well as the health of others. I think that when most people go on vacation, there is this popular notion that has been promoted in our mainstream media that what happens in St. Augustine Beach stays in St. Augustine Beach, right? We all know that phraseology from another city who popularized that concept. And so what it means in a public health crisis, they're getting away from their homes where they know they have to because they're mandated by the state to wear the mask. They're going away for 5 days, maybe a week, maybe a weekend, and they get to be at the beach, and they get to go to Publix, and they get to go to the bars, and they get to go to the restaurants. And you know what? They're only going to be exposed a couple of days, so maybe they don't care as much. But it's our job to protect the people that live here. And when it's happening en masse with that type of mentality, we are just bombarding our residents with a whole host of exposure opportunity. I also want to get back to this whole idea about the ratification that, you know, we can be very strategic in the timing of our request for the ratification. We can go ahead and proceed with the ordinance structure if that's advised by the city attorney, simultaneously with adopting this emergency action, such that over the course of 2 months, we'll have an ordinance adopted, if that's the only barrier to a concern. And then as soon as an ordinance adopted, we can repeal the emergency order and the whole issue. Then a lawsuit would be moot. but I'm not convinced that the city attorney has ever indicated that our action would be moot. So again, I go back, human behavior, it's our obligation to protect our residents. I think all the other concerns of enforcement and legality have been well shown to support the passage of this minor public health accommodation. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Rumwell, any further issues you want to discuss?
Nope, I yield it to the other commissioners at
All
this
right.
time to continue the dialogue.
Okay. And commissioners, I do want to give us all proper and ample time to discuss tonight. We've only got one issue. It's a very important issue. Let's take our time and work through this. Commissioner Samora.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to take a stab at addressing Commissioner Rumrell's concerns. So a few things stand out. One, likening this to a recommendation, or maybe trying to go the route of a strong recommendation that's been tried. The CDC has a strong recommendation out there. Why would a strong recommendation from the city of St. Augustine Beach carry any more weight than the recommendation of the CDC that's not currently being followed? So I throw that out there to you. This order, I don't think, is so much about enforcement as it is education. So, Commander, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do we have laws out there? I believe Commissioner George suggested this also. Do we have laws on our books right now that maybe aren't enforced all the time, but maybe use it more as an educational opportunity with our guests?
Yes, Commissioner. So, of course, if you get pulled over for speeding, the officer has discretion to issue a citation or a verbal warning. So in that respect, we do. Other misdemeanors, we also have discretion to make a physical arrest, forward charges to the state attorney's office, or do some other avenue of change that behavior.
And I believe you and the chief, we've seen the culture that's been cultivated here in St. Augustine Beach with law enforcement, and it's educate the community, educate our visitors. If we don't have anything for them to initiate that educational encounter with, I mean, you're not going to, if there's no law or order that they can come back and say, you know, we're supposed to be wearing masks in this situation, there's going to be nothing done. Having an order on the books with some enforcement teeth to it, if we choose to go that route, at least allows not just businesses, but our law enforcement community, our code enforcement, wherever it may go, to have those educational encounters where we're educating the visitors to our city. So to me, this is more about the messaging than it is the enforcement. I don't think anybody wants to slap a fine on people for not wearing a mask. We want them to be educated about it, and we want them to do the right thing. I don't think a strong recommendation goes far enough. I think that's been tried. So I had a couple other things here. We've gotten a ton of comments on this, right? I'm surprised we didn't have more folks in the room to comment, but we did get a ton of email. And about the only thing that I saw agreement on is that no one loves wearing a mask, right? Everybody agrees, I don't love wearing a mask. Once we get past that one point of agreement, the opinions diverge very quickly. There's data on both sides. There's science on both sides. So you can make this argument either way. You can find the facts to back up your point. One thing that struck me as I've been educating myself and listening and learning is there is no question we are in a different point in our lifetime, something we have never experienced. None of us. It's a global pandemic. It's not a St. Augustine Beach issue. It's not a Florida issue. It's not a red versus blue issue. Okay, this has shut down countries around the world. So it's something different, and I think if there's one small thing that we can do that might slow the spread and it doesn't do any harm, why not try it? So that brings us to where we are tonight. So how do we do this in a way that's not heavy-handed? And it goes into the way the resolution was crafted. And then the mayor covered some of this. I think you guys did a fantastic job crafting an order that gets a strong message out there, but it's not overbearing. It doesn't force people to do things in situations that don't make sense. It has the appropriate exceptions for ADA compliance, for extreme situations. So I really think you did a good job in getting something that allows enough flexibility that it's not going to offend people and run folks off. The most important thing that's going to come out of this, the most important thing I'll probably say, is it's going to come down to the messaging. Okay, so I heard after the city of St. Augustine passed the very similar resolution, I heard comments, oh, well, now if I want to walk down St. George Street, I have to wear a mask. Well, that's not accurate. We've had emails from people saying, I want to go to the beach with my family and I don't want to have to wear a mask. Guess what? You don't have to wear a mask the way that our order is crafted. So it's going to be up to the folks here, the folks that have educated themselves on what this resolution actually says. It's going to be up to the folks that are going to put it out into the media. It's going to be the folks that are listening at home that know what we're actually doing here. And, and the folks that are going to put it out, everybody out here is going to be on social media saying St. Augustine Beach has a mask resolution. And it's either going to say St. Augustine Beach mandated masks, and it's going to come across as if you leave your front door, you have to wear a mask. Or it's going to be something more accurate that says, if you can't social distance, wear a mask. Because that's really what this resolution says. So there are a couple things that I would like to maybe modify in there, minor things, but I'm in support of this.
Okay. Are you ready to discuss some of the modifications you'd like to make?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
One is the penalty. I think, we mimicked what was suggested for the city of St. Augustine at $500. I think that's extreme.
Okay.
I wouldn't go any more than a maximum penalty of $50.
Okay.
And then, of course, we can discuss that. I've heard of ordinances out there that have zero penalty attached to it, but somewhere between 0 and 50, I think, is more acceptable, given the situation. There was an exception that was in the, I'll call it the model ordinance from St. Augustine. It was an exception lettered K, and it explicitly said that the requirement does not apply to any outdoor activity permitted under state order, and it goes on with a little bit more language after that. I don't know why that was removed, and I think it helps clarify to people that want to go to the beach.
It was removed because we added the requirement if you have a special permit and for a gathering of 50 or more people, and it was to the special events at the pier where you need a special permit.
Right.
Concern over a gathering of 50 or more people in a confined space, even though it's outdoors, and you need a permit, that, for example, the farmer's market was permitted without input from the county commissioners or from us, and it requires the vendors to wear a mask and distance, but it doesn't say anything about the people who are there. They're not required to wear a mask. And so we took out K in order to add a requirement for a mask for gatherings, permitted gatherings of 50 or more people that is outside.
I believe there's probably a way we can accommodate both. If we want to require them at permitted events, I believe we can make that part of the permit process, but I'll read it in its entirety what the language was. The requirement does not, and actually I'll change one word.
Okay.
The requirement does not apply to any outdoor activity permitted under city order. Change permitted to allowed. And then but face coverings should be readily available when coming within 6 feet of an individual, not part of the person's immediate family or cohabitating living unit. So I believe something like that would at least get the message out there to folks. You don't have to put a mask on when you're walking your dog or going to the beach.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. Let's see. The timing on this, as far as the effectiveness, do we want to leave this in effect the whole time there's a state of emergency? Do we want to maybe limit it to a 30-day order, a 68-day order? I just wanted to throw that out there for discussion, and that was my last point.
I think we can leave it for the state of emergency, but we can take action on this either by commissioner comment or agenda once we see our infection rate start to come down or stay steady. I would hate to get into a situation where we have to renew. Okay?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that was the last of it for me.
Okay.
Mayor, can I say something very quickly? Just back to Commissioner Samora's point. So currently, right now, if someone called law enforcement at Publix, the manager, and said, there's a gentleman that's not wearing a mask, we have a store policy, they have to wear a mask, we'd like to come, and he's refusing to leave, and we'd like you to come remove him. We would go there and we would remove him, and if he refused to leave, then we would arrest him for trespass after warning. So there's already a mechanism in place for businesses to enforce the mask ban if they choose to. So I just
Right.
wanted to clarify that as well.
Okay, so that's a possibility, especially if a person becomes argumentative. But I really don't want our business owners and employees to get into altercations for
Of course
one
not.
person. Because if we have 85% or 80% compliance, it helps reduce the spread. But I do appreciate the fact you mentioned that, yes.
And there's no need for argument. If they say, sir,
Right.
please leave, and they walk away.
Right.
They call us, say, this gentleman refused to leave, we'll say, sir, will you leave? If they refuse to leave after us, then they're
Yeah,
more than
okay.
likely to go to jail.
Perfect.
Commander, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
If this were Saturday and this ordinance happens to pass this evening, would it not give you another vehicle that maybe not be as punitive as arresting someone for trespassing? Would it allow you to also have the option of giving them a ticket for not wearing a mask?
It could, and again, that would be officer discretion, but for $500, I'm quite sure that we would not, we would not write any tickets for that. I can pretty much assure that right now, and after speaking with Chief on that. However, most of the people that we respond to that refuse to leave, once we get there, they leave, unless they're intoxicated, and then they probably need to go somewhere else anyway. But we have very few issues of when we arrive on scene, or even when the managers ask them to leave, usually they comply. But we've seen the videos of a Publix employee pushing someone down because they didn't wear a mask. That's unnecessary, but just another method for businesses to be aware of, if they weren't already, that they could always call us and remove those individuals from their business.
Thank you. You're good.
Vice Mayor, please, your turn.
So in high school, one of my very best friends one time told me that I was defiant. I was so confused over that, but I'm beginning in these last few years to understand that completely. So I'm going to be the defiant child in the room. And first, I want to start by saying that we have all received and been in touch with many people. And I do want to say that I have read every email that has come through. I have not been able to respond to everyone. That's how many that we have had. I don't think in my 4 years, this is my 4th year as a commissioner, I have ever received so many emails on any one topic. And so it's been very difficult to take the time to respond to everyone. And I don't like doing a blanket response to everyone who writes to me. I like to individualize them, so it takes a little bit longer. I also want to start by saying that I am not in any way, shape, or form anti-mask. I also agree with the CDC, the state, the Department of Health, that masks can help. However, I do have some other things that I would like to bring forward. Indeed, We are all concerned about the increase in positive cases being reported. It's a legitimate concern. The battle against COVID has always been described as a marathon, not a sprint. There is no simple, easy, quick fix. It's also important as we consider making choices about moving forward as to understand and identify the why behind the increase in numbers. What happened between the end of May and the end of June? Well, that is very simple to answer. We went from the second phase of phase 1, or second part of phase 1, into phase 2. The CDC guidelines, the St. Johns County Department of Health and the Florida Department of Health guidelines, as well as the governor's current executive order number 20-139, which became effective on June 5th, all already state and give specific direction regarding the prevention of spread. Additionally, Governor DeSantis came out with more clarity today, especially in light of the upcoming 4th of July weekend, understanding that there will be an increased number of visitors, gatherings, etc. The governor's order, as does all the other agencies, specifically states individuals over 65 and with underlying conditions are encouraged to avoid crowds and take measures to limit the risk of exposure. All individuals, when in public, should maintain at least 6 feet between themselves and all others. Avoid gathering in groups larger than 50. Businesses should maintain appropriate social distancing and sanitation protocols. Individuals traveling to Florida from specific states should self-quarantine for 14 days. When social distancing cannot occur, masks are encouraged. The CDC and Department of Health both state that social distancing combined with proper sanitation, especially frequent hand washing, are the best preventive measures. When social distancing cannot occur, masks are recommended. This is on the CDC website, it's on the Department of Health website, it's in the executive order. From the beginning of this battle, we all recognized that the effort to contain the spread and control the spread would only be accomplished through individual, personal responsibility. We all have to take charge of ourselves. It is up to each and every one of us, our citizens, as well as our visitors, to take this responsibility seriously. I understand the concern from our citizens. I sincerely do. I'm alarmed at the increase in numbers as well. But it's also important to note the positives. Although the number of confirmed cases has increased significantly, the number of deaths has not significantly increased. The reality of this is that with any virus, people are going to get sick. It has never been the intention to help not get sick. I take that back. That was poorly phrased. We do want to help prevent the spread, help prevent people from getting sick, but we can't end that. There are going to be people who get sick. The great thing is that the recovery rate is 98.6. It's not an automatic death sentence, although it's nothing that anybody wants to get. Again, it's up to each individual to take precautions for themselves and follow the established guidelines. Now, I'm having some issues with the proposed resolution that's before us. There are actually several legal problems within the document. First, as we've discussed, and I appreciate the clarification, but we don't have clear authority to pass the emergency order due to not having the necessary emergency plan in place within our city. At our other only COVID meeting, March 20th, and an email from our city manager previous to that meeting, it was established that we would follow the county direction, and this is a clear deviation from the county's current position. Again, it's just food for thought. Many cities have passed similar measures concerning masks and are now being sued. And although there's no cases that have actually gone to court, and so we have nothing to base whether or not what our legal standing will be, I see it as being similar to the plastics ban, where we had a really good intention, made an ordinance and had to backstep to a resolution. At least we're starting in a good place where this is actually a resolution and not an ordinance, and I appreciate that. Many consider that this is an overreach of governmental authority and violates at least 4 constitutional amendments, number 4, 5, 8, and 14. I understand the whole, do we put public safety and what we feel is good public safety guidelines above individual constitutional rights, or is it really kind of the same? That's what we pay you for, Mr. City Attorney. I believe that Section 3C really skates very close to violation of HIPAA law. I don't know what the clear identification plan is for persons, identifying persons with underlying conditions who can't wear a mask. And that's concerning and I'll speak to that later. It's also kind of like what everybody else said. It's an enforcement nightmare, and I completely understand your position, Mayor. Don't let the tail wag the dog. But I don't feel like the enforcement is the tail. It's really part of the body of the dog, and it has to be able to. This has to all work together, or it's not going to work at all. We obviously have no ability to enforce the current, already in place requirements that have been passed down by the state, the Department of Health, the CDC, which includes masks. So how can we realistically expect another measure, another piece of paper to help with enforcement? I'm trying to find the connection there. I spoke to Brian Law about code enforcement and their ability or capability to be able to help enforce this. And he said, absolutely not. I don't know if you had a chance to, anybody else had a chance to talk to him, but they do not have the resources, nor does he feel he has the authority. It puts the police department in a serious compromised position that the department doesn't have the resources to enforce either, especially when we have a holiday weekend beginning tomorrow, and their focus should be on law enforcement. And I'm not making light of this issue at all. Please understand that. This is a very serious issue. Given that there's no clear enforcement plan, I'm concerned about this. We have no clear enforcement plan. The public, what if they start taking things into their own hands? And we have seen this at Publix. I talked to Mike, the manager at Publix, this morning. Publix moved to an employee mandatory mask by their corporate direction. So they're kind of in a different scenario than the rest of the businesses in St. Augustine Beach, where they are governed by their corporate entity. They made moves because they have stores all across the state and in other states that are included in those high case number areas. And so they made steps to preempt themselves and to help themselves combat the spread. We don't need to encourage our citizens to turn against each other. Folks, we're all in this together. We have to take it's us against this approach, or none of this is going to work. I have seen for myself in Publix, customers arguing with each other of whether they should have a mask on or not. I have witnessed it in my own business. There seems to be a stumbling over words like recommended, and people imply that in their own mind as mandatory. Right now we have a recommended mask use. Even the resolution that's before us is strongly recommending the use of masks, but I don't think it's within our rights to mandate the use of masks. So we're getting into some really complicated splitting hair decisions about wording. This also consider the burden that the enforcement places on businesses, as it's stated in Section 2C. So I was wondering how many business owners that anybody has spoken to. I've spoken to 6. And I can tell you that our local businesses have taken matters into their own hands. Some of our businesses have gone back to takeout only. My own business, I went to drive-through only. It does not help sales, but as I told my employees, their safety is far more important than money in the bank. I have seen other businesses take the approach where they went back to making it mandatory for their employees to wear masks. I believe that businesses can regulate themselves. Also, they have to be held, they are held accountable to the DBPR, and although the DBPR is overrun with phone calls and complaints and is not even answering the phone anymore, I don't think, we still have to report to them. We still are obligated to report to the Department of Health. There are still health codes that we have to abide by. Some businesses have a requirement for masks to be worn before the entry to their business. It creates a serious misinterpretation by the public of the word recommends and the perception equating this to mean mandatory. So let's go back. When did this surge start to occur? Well, we saw it when Phase 2 began, which coincides to the restrictions that were being in place being relaxed. The governor's step-by-step phased-in approach already has a built-in mechanism in place should counties or cities start to see a significant change within their jurisdiction. And when he launched his plan, his suggested response to any increase in spread was to take a step back. This has been the established plan from the beginning. Some counties have already done this. We look at Miami-Dade. They have taken a step back. They have gone to even closing their beaches. So my philosophy is we should be looking at what measures we're currently taking to encourage the directions that are already in place. And I would put more emphasis on that. I'm saddened that we don't have more visible encouragement to especially our visitors of what we are requiring of them. On June 14th, while searching our webpage for something else, under the tab for COVID-19 resources, the most recent document posted was information on Phase 1, Part 1. We had already moved into Phase 2. Although today, everything is up to date, I want to say that, everything is up to date, but perhaps our own messaging has room for improvement, right? We should have like highlighted on there, the city recommends everyone wear a face mask when in public places, which is exactly what the governor's order says today. It's like the 3 C's, and I thought I made a copy of that, but I cannot find it, locate it. And I think it's very good direction. Surgical grade masks aren't available for the public and are rightfully being reserved for caregivers and emergency responders. Another thing we have to consider is what are the supply requirements should we pass this resolution, which is scheduled to go into effect tomorrow? So do we have all of the resources available to provide that all of our citizens can obtain a mask, all of our businesses can obtain a mask? And if you're going to suggest that a business should give their customers masks, that's going to put an additional financial burden on the individual businesses. So everyone, yes, should have a mask, but do we have enough supply in stores and availability for everyone to have a mask in all of the citizens as well as all of the visitors? Because I would lend to believe that the increase began when we began to allow more visitors into our community. And I'm nothing against tourism. I have a business here that depends on tourism, but we have to take precautionary steps to ensure the safety of everyone. Controlling and minimizing the spread should be the focus of everyone. Following the current already in place guidelines should be strongly encouraged. I don't know if we need more direction. If we do, then let's do it. But if we do something like that, I would also like to see a list of situations where a mask would be appropriate, as well as a situation where a mask would not necessarily be needed. It concerns me that I see people driving with masks on. It can impair vision and just as dangerous as texting. If you're in your own car, you should probably not have to have a mask. If it makes you feel more comfortable, wear a mask. Going to the beach, like Commissioner Samora said, it's not required to wear a mask. So there's a lot of misconception about when and where is appropriate. So if we do move forward with this, I would like more clarification for that, for the public on that. And I would also like to Commander Ashlock, if I could have you speak a little bit more about, and I hear you saying the businesses have a way to be able to enforce this by calling and requesting somebody be removed from property if they're not wearing a mask. But could you speak a little bit to, what is your experience, or can you speak to the issues at Publix of people trying to enforce each other, I suppose? And I am fearful of situations like that.
Yes, Vice Mayor, so I'm not aware of any physical altercations that have arisen in these local businesses due to people not wearing masks. I've heard rumors of just like I believe we all have, of people kind of stepping in, trying to get them to take their way of thought one way or the other, whichever way that may be. I can definitely look up our calls for service, but I'm not aware in the past week or so if we've had any complaints where we responded because of a mask issue. I know previously when this all happened with the quarantine requirements from out of state, we had numerous complaints about my friend, my neighbor has a car and they're driving from New York, they're violating it. There's a guy at the condo that has a plate from New Jersey, and most of those are unfounded. The two of those that I brought up, one had been here for almost 6 months, and the other one has moved down here and actually violated the law by not changing his address in time. So we took care of that. However, the big thing is that there's a method for businesses to regulate who they allow in their business, and correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty much anything aside from the protected classes from the '64 Civil Rights Act, more or less, they can. So if they say you can only wear pink shirts in here, and you come in with a blue shirt and they don't want you there and they call us, then it's the same thing as if not wearing a mask. So, but I'm not aware of any situations where we've had to respond to for conflict.
Okay, and I don't know who to direct this question to, but I have a question about how do we make our visitors, especially checking into hotels and Airbnbs, aware of our recommendations or our requirements. And the hinging question on that is how will that impact visitors or tourists' opinion of us? Because I know that's been kind of a seesaw and a delicate balancing act by the VCB and
Vice Mayor, if I may, on
Yes.
that one, just like when the governor issued an executive order, We followed up with a message to all our businesses, and I think we even had staff go out and explain some of the capacity requirements. If this passes tonight, we would also do the same thing with our businesses, communicate with them. Our communications manager will issue an FAQ. We'll work on that, similar to what some other municipalities have done when they've passed a similar resolution. And so we will communicate the requirements and provide copies and in plain language and FAQ. So we'll get the communication out. So we will do that.
So I'm not so concerned about our citizens and our local businesses. I'm really more concerned about the compliance of the people who are coming into our community. And I can give you an example. So I own a very small business.
We'll let the hotels also know. The hotels will be informed, the hotel managers, so that they can post something for their guests.
Okay, and then what do we do if this isn't working? Because we already have these, like I said before, we already have these guidelines in place. There are recommendations by the CDC, the Department of Health, St. Johns County, as well as a state order requiring out-of-state guests to self-quarantine for 14 days. That's still effective. But I can assure you that a lot are not doing that.
There's a lot of what-ifs. Perhaps some of this is far-reaching and getting into the weeds a little bit. So I think it's maybe time to wrap it up.
Okay. And I just did want to make one other point, is that our city is only part of the 32080 zip code, and actually we have 3 cases within our city limits at the current time. There are a couple of things within here that I do have some concern about. On page 14, paragraph 5, that is actually not correct information, so I would request that that be removed.
Say that again. What is
Page
it?
14, paragraph 5, where it mentions that on June 23rd, the county commission passed 2 resolutions. Nobody could find them. And they did not,
There was, on that meeting.
Did not enter into an agreement.
Henry Dean made a motion and made a suggestion for stronger language, for the county to issue stronger language encouraging the use of the mask, and that passed 3-2. And then Commissioner Blocker offered a motion to add stronger language to the pledge, St. Johns County, which passed 5-1. That's the reference here to what the county did.
I think as it's written, it's a little bit misleading.
Okay.
Mayor, can you give us that citation? I'm having a hard time locating that section.
Let's see. It is St. Johns County. It is the 5th whereas on page 14. All the whereases we condensed a little bit on all the whereases that were in the St. Augustine resolution. We condensed it, so we talked about what the more recent action by the St. Johns County Board of County Commissioners in their June 23rd meeting, where they talked about masks, and although they didn't pass a mandatory mask resolution, Commissioner Dean proposed a motion that passed for strengthening, or issuing a statement to strengthen or encourage use of the mask, which the county did. And then also Commissioner Blocker suggested that the language with the pledge, St. Johns County, that the language was strengthened, and that motion passed 5-1.
Thank you, Mayor.
Now,
Thank
I
you,
mean,
Mayor. I'm familiar with the history. I'm trying to see how it's, if that's the paragraph we were talking about. I'm trying to figure out how that's
and
misleading.
I do not want us to face passing or not passing this resolution based on a whereas paragraph. It can come out. It can be changed. So I don't want to think about the importance of this resolution based on a whereas.
Thank you.
I agree. So perhaps Vice Mayor has some suggested
Right.
amendment to that paragraph.
I don't have any suggestions to change it. I just think it's misleading and should be deleted. But I also have a suggestion for under face coverings. At the very end of that, it says, or similar cloth coverings or shields. I actually bought a sample of a shield, and I just wish we could add plastic shield, because to designate it as separate from cloth covering or cloth shield, which it kind of implies that it's cloth.
Okay.
How about saying polymer shields? It's more broad
Sure.
category.
Yeah.
Or keeping shields and, including plastic or polymer shields.
Sure. And then my only other concern is having enough masks available for everyone that will be affected by this resolution beginning tomorrow.
I believe many retail places are selling masks, and the businesses can. The city of St. Augustine has purchased quite an abundance of masks that they have offered to sell to businesses at a very low price. So I'm not sure that lack of masks that's just my opinion.
Okay.
If I may, I've heard a lot of comments about personal responsibility, and I don't think you can have personal responsibility and not have a mask, right? So if we're expecting people by recommendation to do what we want them to do, I suppose personal responsibility should probably have a mask. I wouldn't get hung up on that.
I do know that I've been a couple of places to see if, and the masks that are available at, my friend made for the city and the police department, and that I'm wearing, they're available at Ace Hardware, and love you, mean it. So, and there are masks in other retail establishments. And the business can obtain them at a very low price through the city of St. Augustine. I know John Reagan has purchased like 140,000, a lot. He's purchased a lot for businesses, so we can take care of that. So, anything else?
I think that wraps it up for me.
Okay, all right. So I think unless, we've talked about everything, and I just want to bring it back to the commissioners to any further questions. Remind everyone that we have received a significant amount of email with our residents indicating over 75, maybe 76 so far that our clerk has said are in favor of the resolution, and 11 that are against it, and I'm sure there are more as we speak. And the only other last thing that I want to mention is that as far as an additional burden on the business, I believe in counter to that, we definitely do not want we want to help our businesses, help them mitigate any infestation, any incident, because if an employee of the business gets sick, or through contact tracing, a patron has been there, and the business has to close and disinfect at the cost of thousands of dollars. One of the things that this resolution purports to do is help the business give them something that helps support them, require reasonable ways that is suggested by the CDC and authorities to minimize the spread or the incidence of an infection so that they don't have to go through that. I believe that this really helps the business stay open and not have to close. So I'm at a point now to call, unless any commissioners have anything else they want to say before I ask for a motion.
Madam Mayor, may I make a point of information before we move on, just so everybody is clear? Because this is an emergency meeting, we're required to have at least a two-thirds vote to pass anything tonight, and so that will require at least 4 commissioners to vote in affirmation of whatever we decide to pass.
Okay, thank you so much. That's an important thing. Okay. So the heat is on.
This is Commissioner George. Commissioner Samora had brought up the question about the fine amount. I just wanted to point out that the resolution as drafted, it does not actually state a $500 fine. Rather, it says up to $500. So I don't know how the city of St. Augustine did it, if they had a separate resolution that filled in that question of how you get to $500, but I might suggest that we amend the draft so that the first violation is $50, the second violation is $250, and the third violation be $500. Because I do think that messaging is very compelling. And, so I think that that's what would be on the sign. And, it's just how I would suggest. I'd like to get some feedback from the rest of the commission on that. And to the extent there, I could jump ahead and make a motion, but I might just hold back at this point, Mayor. Unless you're looking for a motion, then I will proceed.
I'll give you, I like that, that's fine. I just didn't want to have it out there that it's a $500 fine. So
Okay.
I like the escalating structure. That meets what I was after.
Okay, great. Then I'll make a motion to approve the resolution as drafted with the following amendments. First, that the fine structure be further articulated to provide that the first violation is $50 fine, the second violation is $250 fine, and the third violation is a $500 fine, and to remove the fifth whereas paragraph.
And then the other suggestion, Commissioner, would be to add paragraph K. Let the attorney work with that. Add back paragraph K in section 3.
Thank you. Yes, that was on my list on a different page. Thank you. Yes, that is the motion. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, we are ready for the roll call vote. Thank you all very much.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Costa,
I need to represent the 11 no.
okay, Commissioners George,
Yes.
Commissioner Rumwell,
No.
Commissioner Samora.
Yes.
Motion passes 3 to.
We need 4. We need 4. It does not pass. So there we have
Can
it.
we have some feedback from Commissioner Rumrell or Vice Mayor Koska if there's some other modification to the motion that they would support?
I have a question on, so if we are invoking a fine and it's a non-criminal civil infraction, who's to collect that, or how do we enforce that?
Code enforcement.
I mean, we can, Your Honor, we can file those and attempt to collect them. It'd be hard if we can't find addresses, but we have a process which we can do that.
Here's the thing, we don't have many law enforcement patrolling the interior spaces of private businesses. So again, I would just, compel my colleagues to consider the fact that what this does is it merely gives the private businesses an additional resource to enforce the standards that they want to set in their business. I think a lot of times private business owners are worried about implementing, kind of standards that they would set for fear of getting sued for not providing, public accommodation consistent with the law. So I really feel strongly that what we're doing is we're giving them an additional tool as opposed to creating an additional burden, because we don't have police policing the inside of these enclosed spaces.
The enforcement issue, again, I just, the message is to encourage this, and just even in the pledge, the stronger language is not working based on what we saw in Publix. And it's our main grocery store, the number of people going in there. And so enforcement our businesses are the first line of defense. So I don't know if there's any other language we can add and make changes to the, Commissioner Rumwell, is there any changes we can make to the resolution that would help you be in favor?
I think if I were to change I would do a strong recommendation, not mandatory, but a strong recommendation that we do it as a resolution from the city of St. Augustine. And then, if we have to revisit this in a few weeks to see if the numbers are continuing to go, I think we have the right to do that. But I think right now, doing a strong recommendation would be, I would be for that, and I would vote for that.
We've had nearly 10,000 people in one day. What would be the sufficiently high amount to say that now something more is needed? That's a larger daily count than any day in Massachusetts alone.
The pledge, St. Johns County has just strengthened their language. Commissioner Rumwell has strengthened their language with a strong recommendation, and that's backed by the Chamber of Commerce. I'm not sure an additional recommendation, stronger recommendation by the city of St. Augustine by resolution is going to be more persuasive. I don't think that's going to get us there.
I'm not sure that a city resolution can make a bigger impact than a state order. And so, believe me, I adamantly support every individual wearing a mask when they can't social distance. I just don't know if this is the correct vehicle for us to get there.
But what's the harm? So if you don't know if it is or not, what's the harm in trying it?
This is a holiday weekend. How about if we deal with... I'm sorry.
Mayor, may I?
Yes.
So I've heard from Vice Mayor Koska and Commissioner Rumrell the idea of encouraging. They want to encourage people to do more, and I'm challenging them to bring some ideas to the table. How would you communicate better with the community than passing something like this that says masks are required? Or how would you reach out to the community to get better engagement from them on the recommendations that are already in place at the state and county levels?
The same thing that you would do in educating the community on if this would have passed. because it's no different. The resolution is exactly what the state is ordering everyone to do.
Okay, but do you think if we pass this tonight as a requirement, that the word is going to get out there and spread to the people more effectively than what I believe I've also heard, which is the CDC, state requirements, and the county pledge just aren't getting done. The teeth aren't there, the people aren't taking it upon themselves to do the right thing. So do you think just us reaching out on our social media, whatever vehicles we have, is going to be any more effective than that? Or do you think something like a resolution that requires masks when social distancing can't be followed might grab their attention a little bit better or more effectively? Or do you have something that could be more effective than that?
I don't know. Why don't we try the messaging and we can revisit this at any point in time?
I have to ask you've got to understand, we can't take comments from everyone anymore. No, ma'am, I have to ask you to stop, or I will have to ask you to leave. I understand how passionate you are about things, but we just cannot take any more comments from the participants here. It's up to the commissioners.
Mayor, I have a question for the city attorney.
Okay.
Yes, if we have an agenda item on Monday or Tuesday's meeting to consider this, so that it's not part of an emergency meeting, would we still require the supermajority vote?
Yes, Commissioner, the issue is that this would normally be an ordinance because we're creating a fine, so simply putting it in a regular meeting is not going to fix the issue.
Follow up on that, if it were a resolution with a warning versus a fine, would that change the game?
We have plenty of resolutions that set the amount of fines, whereas the ordinance just says a fee established by the city manager. So how do we remove a dollar amount from this? Although I, worry that would lose its effect as a sign, but is there a way around it to recraft this emergency order to put the amount of the fine delegated to the city manager?
Again, I don't believe that. I think it's because we're initially establishing a new violation, and that's going to fall into that same problem. I don't know if you were to say that the first violation was a warning, if that would make it more politically palatable for the commission. So that way nobody would be fined without knowing that there was a law in place. That'd be, I could understand that. But I don't think we're going to get around, and I can research and see if I can't figure a good way, but I do think we're stuck with requiring the 4/5 vote.
No matter how this is crafted or what we do, we need a 4/5 vote.
Yeah, the only way around that would be, I believe, doing an ordinance, and I can research it and see if there's a way around that part of it. But yeah, because we can do an ordinance by a normal vote, but that takes time and notice.
Right.
Okay, so what about for Commissioner Rummel and Vice Mayor Koska, if I amend the motion to state that the first violation is a warning, the second violation is $50, and the third violation is $500, would that bring you over to supporting such a motion?
Commissioner Rumwell, is there anything we can do to this resolution that requires a mandatory face covering to obtain your support?
Again, I'm for face coverings. I wear it, my family wears it. I think what would give me some comfortable level is, again, the enforcement side, and also if the county will ratify it, if we discuss with the county and say this is what we are doing and present it to them. They have an emergency meeting on Tuesday. And if we can present it to them and if they say, hey, if that's what you all choose to do, then I think that would change some viewpoints of what I have. I still think that the finding side of it, like Commissioner Samora had said, I mean, it's hard to do an amount. I think $50 would be absolutely the top of the line, but I mean, I think a $0 amount. But if the county would ratify it, then I think that's a different situation. My fear, again, is we're going through this process, and we're going to pass an ordinance that will be shot down by the county. And I understand the legal argument behind it. But again, I strongly believe in the process that we have in place. And if the county says no, we can't enforce it anyway. So it turns back into a recommendation.
Well, we don't have a process in place on this. This is groundbreaking territory. The governor of Texas has just an hour ago mandated masks for the entire state. There is no requirement that we defer to the county. We are a separate municipality. We have a separate legal structure, and our citizens deal with different issues than the citizens across the breadth of St. Johns County, and they're looking to us for guidance. I've proposed a suggestion that the first quote unquote civil violation constitutes a warning. I feel like that completely ameliorates both of your concerns, because first of all, I think we've given pretty clear unspoken direction to law enforcement about how this should, if or when ever, be enforced, which would really only be if a private business owner is needing assistance. Okay, so we have essentially delegated, in a sense, enforcement to the private business owners that need that backup. So then that would also indicate most likely it would be someone who's not maybe living around here long enough to get a second or a third violation, but at least still the messaging can state the fine could be as high as $500, which is the same fee structure that the governor of Florida has utilized for enforcing the 14-day quarantine period. I think it's very consistent with state law, with City of St. Augustine standards, and with what a lot of other states are doing around the country. Those states that did this in the beginning, their numbers have never reached the heights of ours, and they have continuously gone down in their numbers. Ours are only accelerating. I think it's irresponsible for us to do something, so I would please implore you to suggest something else that would still accomplish the same messaging that we can achieve and pass tonight.
Commissioner Rumwell, I just want to, as far as the county blessing our approval, I believe we do need to pass something and get a resolution in front of their nose in order for to request that they bless this. And if they don't, or don't suggest changes to it, then we will pull this back to discuss it further.
Okay.
In other words, we can't ask them to ratify something that doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay.
So if we change some language in the resolution, as suggested by Commissioner George, are you getting more warm and comfortable in supporting this resolution?
I think I'm still in the point, Mayor, where we have to, I mean, the answer is I wish everybody would do it without having us to mandate it. And I think that in line with Vice Mayor Koska, I think that we have to, the message is the same. So whether we force it through an ordinance or we suggest it, the messaging is still has to be the same. And so I'm willing to revisit it at a later date if people are not following what we've highly suggested. And I know we've gone over the pledge, and I know we've done that, but I don't think we as a city of St. Augustine Beach has emphasized locally enough effort or messaging to our residents without that. This has been the only real topic that we have discussed as a commission the whole time this COVID-19 has gone on. And so we followed the county's guidelines, we followed the state's guidelines, and now we're not in line with what the county is saying. And again, most people here at the beach don't know what side the county begins, what side the city of St. Augustine begins, and what side the city of St. Augustine Beach begins. On Pope Road, you touch all three jurisdictions. And so I think the messaging has to be a solid messaging, and I'm still thinking that it's not going to pass at the county, and then we're going to have to come back and revisit this. And based on what I've been shared tonight is that none of the businesses necessarily are prepared for tomorrow anyways. And so how do we get to that point? I'm not anti-mask. I am pro-mask, and I think everybody should wear it. It's not a political thing. It's not, I think it's a straight line of government, and how do we impose and perform when we're not prepared ourselves? We don't even have a mask mandate in our own city buildings. So how can we be examples if we don't have that same law? And so that's what I'm trying to figure out, is how to do that.
I think that's what we're trying to do here tonight.
Yes.
Is create a mandate.
And the only other, it's down to you're either think that a mandatory mask requirement will help, or you don't, your ideology says, no, I don't want to mandate it. But think about Publix, and without the mandate and with all the strong encouragement and everything else that has been coming out from every source of the state and everywhere, people were walking around Publix without a mask until Publix realized we were going to pass this resolution, and then they put the sign up and people complied. So the mandate helps the business. It gives them, it shores them up. It gives them something to tag on to. So that the resolution as drafted and it just gives the businesses something to hang on to, more than just the word strongly encourage. We encourage you to require. But if you disagree with that, I know we can disagree,
No, and I appreciate that, but I also know that in Gainesville, Publix requires masks for both employees and residents. And you know what? Gainesville does not have a mask ordinance. They repealed it on May 19th. And so Publix has every right, and I appreciate it. We all who live on the island shop at Publix. Mm-hmm. So again, they're doing it in Alachua County in Gainesville at the Publix there. They can do it essentially at every Publix if that was the stance of Publix. And so I think there needs to be some accountability back to the businesses to do it. And I think the other problem I think we have too, Mayor, is anybody can say, I can't wear a mask because I have a medical condition. Anybody can say that. And so you could walk into a store and say it. I could walk into, and it doesn't mean that it's true or not true, but no one can question that. And I think we're putting the burden, again, on the police. We have one person in code enforcement. So are we going to send one person to all these calls and then have to have a code enforcement meeting? I think there may be another mechanism, and the five of us are smart enough to come up with that mechanism. I believe that. I truly believe that. And so I'm willing to work with the other four of you all at a commission meeting where we can discuss, obviously, this type of situation, because I know we can come up with something. I know we can, and I'm willing to do it tonight if we have to. But I think that we have to figure out a mechanism in place that doesn't put the burden on our law enforcement or our single code enforcement person. And I think that's not fair.
What law have we ever crafted that would not create a burden on law enforcement and code enforcement? I just, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to hear what the real argument is. And I don't hear that as really making sense, because any regulation we ever pass will always inherently, create a need for enforcement from law enforcement and code enforcement. That's what they're for. So I need a better argument than it's going to create a burden on them. Please explain it to me.
I'd like Commander Ashlock, if you'd like to chime in on the law enforcement side of how you all would enforce if someone were to not wear a mask and they come to you and say that I have a medical condition. How do we do it? I feel like we're not only exposing our law enforcement to having to mandate and go to these calls and putting them in situations. We have a very small police department, and we've already had one police officer who has gotten sick. And so we're now asking them to monitor, and if the business, and to the point of if businesses are supposed to regulate it now, why can't businesses regulate it on their own without an ordinance?
With all due respect, I do want to hear anything our commander has to say, but I would like to understand, Commissioner Rumrell, you're digging your heels in very strongly on this, so I presume you have already formulated arguments that substantiate your position. I would like to hear from you the answer of my question before we take somebody else's input, which is kind of a distraction from it.
My stance is that we have to have it ratified first by the county. So by having this discussion and argument and trying to figure out a solution, if the county says no, it becomes a moot point. I also believe that in government, by mandating something that we cannot enforce, and I know there's stuff on the books, and I wish we could clean some of that up, but by mandating something that we cannot enforce, I think is also bad government.
Commissioner Rumwell,
I'm sorry, Mayor.
the 50% capacity rule and the social distancing rule, we don't have 100% enforcement on that each time, every day, every instance. And the police agency is not expected to enforce those rules. This resolution would be similar. The police agency will not be expected to enforce a required or mandatory face covering rule, period. So let's set that one aside and talk about some of the other things that perhaps we can work with you on.
Okay, and I also believe that the DVPR is in charge of enforcing the 50% rule.
Yes.
I believe that executive order also delegated authority to local law enforcement. Was that, am I mistaken? I might be mistaken, but I believe that's the way the capacity rules were originally written.
There seems to be a passing around of responsibility, Commissioner George, on that issue, which is my underlying concern about this resolution. So if we are passing a resolution and we don't intend to enforce it, then why do we have a resolution? That's what I keep coming back to. And the enforceability is what I'm hearing is that we have no intention on enforcing it. So I would like the city to take a clearer stand on messaging and get back in touch with the hotels, which is where the larger issue is coming from, where our visitors are not wearing masks. I don't think our citizens have as big of a trouble or issue with not wearing a mask as the people that are coming into our area from other states and areas. I have great reservations about passing on anything that we have no intention of enforcing. We have already state orders that we are supposed to be enforcing, so let's highlight the messages of that to our visitors and citizens and continually encourage the use of masks. I haven't seen, other than like on the county webpage or Department of Health webpage or CDC webpage, the encouraging use of face masks when social distancing cannot occur. Let's send out a huge campaign on that from the city and make that our position. I'm not sure that, I'm struggling with making a resolution and intentionally saying we aren't going to enforce it, and putting that responsibility on the businesses who are already trying to create an avenue that they can comply with for themselves. I don't know if there's one business that we have in St. Augustine Beach that is not making attempts to comply with the directives. And so that's where I'm stuck. And I feel bad for Commissioner Rumwell because you seem to have gotten all the questions and the heat. But that's where I struggle. And so I suppose that, perhaps we can hear from Commander Ashlock, but I have very, very strong reservations about passing something and then saying that we don't have any intention on enforcing it, that we're going to leave it up to the businesses to enforce, when I'm not sure that that's where the issue really lies.
Well, in the business, if a person shows up without a mask and there's a mandatory requirement for the city of St. Augustine for a mask to be used by that patron, and the business, of course, will say you can come in or not. So the first line of defense is the business. It has to be. That's the way. And if we can get compliance with the wearing of a face mask to help reduce, if we can get it up to, from people rarely wearing one to higher compliance by the business saying it's required, not it's recommended, it's required, hopefully people will comply. It's that language, you shall wear a mask. It's required. The city requires it. City Hall as well as businesses. And our residents here have overwhelmingly supported, asked us to do something, and I don't think our residents are concerned about the niceties of exactly how we enforce it. I really don't think so.
I agree, and I take objection to the classification that we are intentionally passing something that we have no intention of enforcing. I think that's really deviating from the point here. I think that our law enforcement constantly has to deal with struggling how to enforce any law. Look at drunk driving, right? We all know it's illegal, but if we cannot enforce every time somebody gets in a car inebriated and beyond the legal limit, we're only able really to enforce it if there's some evidence of it, or if somebody gets pulled over at a checkpoint, which many people argue is unconstitutional, or worst case scenario, when somebody has harmed another. With this kind of a pandemic, we don't have the tools to trace when somebody has harmed another. So it's not that we're telling our law enforcement not to enforce, it's that any law we ever pass always has struggles with enforceability. Look at our building codes. You can't see behind every square foot of insulation to make sure that there's the proper amount of nails every square footage. We always have enforcement issues. This is not being suggested and proposed for lack of enforcement. It's just saying that we are not giving a clear direction that law enforcement now has to walk into every enclosed space to hunt out people not wearing a mask. Rather, if somebody, whether it be a business owner or somebody in close proximity to another person who's flaunting this standard and or other issues, it's one more tool in the toolbox. So I would also suggest that, it's not hotels only. We have a huge amount of day trippers. If you look at the way the money is spent by the VCB, a lot of our advertising is in-state. We have thousands of people that flock here for the day. They're day trippers. So then they're not staying in the hotels. Messaging at hotels alone would not be enough. So you are right, though, Vice Mayor. I have put Commissioner Rumrell on the hot seat, and now I'd like to put you on the hot seat. I would like you to articulate very clearly what your principal objection is to this resolution.
I'll state it again. We already have orders by the governor, which were solidified today again, reiterated and solidified, and a message was put out to please reinforce the wearing of masks. We have messaging by the CDC. We have messaging by the Department of Health. So what we need to do is better messaging for our city that we are not taking a high tolerance to the exceptions, that we want to encourage the use of masks. Again, I am not anti-mask. I am adamantly asking everyone that cannot social distance to please take this personal responsibility and wear a mask. But I'm just not certain that this does that. So we can be here all night, and I'm not going to change my mind. So if that's what it's all about, I can tell you clearly, I will listen to you, and I deeply respect all of your opinions, but I'm not going to change my vote, and I'm not going to change my mind.
And I respect that, but I would like, since this is a forum for debate, our governor left it up, and in his great wisdom, and I think it was appropriate, left it up to each local government. And in fact, we are empowered as a local government, and that was part of the governor's order. We are free to implement additional rules. That's part of our local rule always, but especially during this pandemic. We're free to create those additional restrictions or guidelines or mandates that are appropriate for our community, because not every community is appropriate. Rural farming communities, maybe this wouldn't be appropriate. But I believe in our community, because we have so much tourism, it would be appropriate. So can you please speak to that argument and express to me why you feel, in light of that, in our community, why it's not appropriate? Thank you.
It's very clear, Commissioner, that you're an attorney. So once again, I am a supporter of everyone taking independent personal responsibility. I am a supporter of people wearing masks when they can't social distance. I adamantly support that. It is stated by our governor, it is stated by the Department of Health, it is stated by the CDC that it helps control spread. I am not in opposition to that. I am very, very concerned about the lack of enforcement. I'm concerned that we're not even setting, like someone else said, we're not setting the example in our own house here at City Hall. We don't have a sign on City Hall door that says masks required to enter. So maybe we will tomorrow, correct. So let's set the example. Let's try stronger messaging. Let's get the word out. Let's talk to the businesses. Do all of the businesses or any of the businesses in our community support this measure? Because the businesses that I talk to, other than Publix, which is an exception to the rest of the businesses, which are independent small businesses. How are their feelings on this, as to you're asking the independent businesses to be the enforcer? You really are. And I don't know how I feel, where my comfort level is with that. They can do that on their own now. And like I said before, each individual business is taking measures that they feel are appropriate for their own individual business, which is, God bless America. That's what we're all about. And abiding by the codes and guidelines. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's my feeling on this.
I don't know that it really answers my question of what it is about this community particularly would accept it from the benefit of a universal mandate that would protect health in a minor public health accommodation. No, but it does communicate to me that what you said earlier, there is nothing that's going to change your opinion. So, okay, thank you for engaging with me. I appreciate it.
Of course.
But, I adamantly disagree. I feel that we have a duty.
I appreciate
and we're neglecting it.
Commissioner George, I believe that bottom line is the word mandate is troublesome to two of our other commissioners, and it may be that it will take further investigation or rise in cases, and hopefully that doesn't occur, because that's what all our residents are concerned about. Commissioner Samora, were you going to say something?
Yeah, it's clear that we're kind of stuck here, and
Right.
and in an attempt to move things forward, maybe in a different direction. First, I wanted to comment. I keep hearing about getting the word out, engaging the public. There's going to be one of two headlines that come out of this meeting, and it's going to be more impactful than anything we do with putting up signs and sending out flyers. It's either going to be St. Augustine Beach mandates masks, or St. Augustine Beach does not mandate masks. That's what you're going to hear tomorrow, one of those two messages. So just process that for a minute. But if we want to take another action, first of all, can we adopt something other than the resolution as presented?
If it's the same subject matter, you definitely can. So if you wanted to do something on facial coverings, that would be appropriate.
Okay. If we wanted to, I'll throw out a lifeline. If we wanted to just change some of the verbiage in here from required to strongly recommended in the appropriate places, and leave the bulk of this, remove the penalties, but leave the bulk of the resolution intact, I think we could probably get to a place where we come away with a resolution that strongly recommends face coverings. It's not going to change the headline. It's going to be St. Augustine Beach does not mandate masks, but it gives us something that we can revisit and maybe modify down the line. I just wanted to throw something else out there to change the direction of the conversation.
That's a good idea. And what about, could we even say mandate, but remove any fine at all? Commissioner Rumrell, would that be any better for you, or are you held up on the verb mandate?
I'm held up on the verb mandate. I think that I think that we all agree that there should be a stronger recommendation than currently what we have done in St. Augustine Beach, which has been nothing. I think we need to now step up our own. I'm willing to support a strong recommendation, as Commissioner Samora has said, and move with it in that direction. And I'm willing to even take it a step further to say, in City Hall, masks are required. And let's start with our own stuff first. We haven't done it with our own people. How can we expect other people to do it? If we're to lead by example, we need to start with us first.
Well, I agree that should occur, but it doesn't need to be temporarily first. It can happen at the same time. Although I wholly agree it should have happened a long time ago.
I like to strongly recommend. I think that is good verbiage, not even just recommend. The City of St. Augustine Beach strongly recommends that tourists, visitors, businesses wear face masks. And face masks, as defined in what we said, I'm comfortable with. Again, it has nothing to do with the coverings of what goes on people's face. I'm all for it, just like Vice Mayor Koska. But I think a stronger campaign from the city would help out. I think that I don't want to not do something, and that's why I'm for a strong recommendation. But I also believe that, to Vice Mayor Koska's point, if I can't enforce it, why can we have it? And back to DUI, that's all enforceable. A DUI is enforceable. But we're saying now we're not enforcing something that we could potentially have. So I differ, Commissioner George, and I respect you very much. But I think that where we are now, I'm supportive of a very strong recommendation. And look, I think we all should go to Publix and say, you do it in Gainesville, why don't you do it in St. Augustine Beach?
Excuse me, ladies, please, we can't have discussion on the floor and discussion amongst the commissioners. So Commissioner Samora, I appreciate your lending that comment because it put my whole thinking in a different direction. And you're right, I think that there's a big struggle with that word mandatory. And I also do believe, though, that we need stronger messaging from City Hall because it's not coming, and no, we have nothing from City Hall. What about this? A resolution of the City Commission of the City of St. Augustine Beach providing for the requirements for the indoor use of face coverings in response to the community. What about that? And how does that set with you? And if we took out the fine requirements? Because really that's what this is it's giving directions, right? It's giving directions to our citizens, visitors, and everybody within the city on what they should do about face coverings. So, I don't know. I'm trying to make a bridge. I really am. I'm like Commissioner Rumwell. I'm not opposed to face coverings. That's not my issue. I think they should be used. However, I have a struggle with putting out a document that we can't enforce or that we have no intention of enforcing. So feedback on that, providing for the requirements for the indoor use of face coverings.
That would be in the title. How would you phrase section 2? Would it be the same?
Section 2.
Section 2 is where that's where the teeth of this really is. Section 2, A.
I'm so tired. Yeah, that does become kind of a contradiction. But not really. This is in complete agreement with the state order and the CDC guidelines.
So if we change the resolution to replacing the word mandatory with strongly recommended wherever mandatory and where it uses the word shall to a different language, in other words, direct our city attorney to remove the mandatory language throughout and remove the enforcement section. And then remove section 6, ratification by St. Johns County. I think we would need to look at the resolution maybe at Monday's meeting to see what that looks like.
In its reworked phase. And in the meantime, can we give direction to city staff to put out stronger messaging on our social media sites for following the state orders that require face coverings when social distancing can't occur?
Input from our city manager, Max. There's, we can do a lot of things, and I know that our staff is wearing a mask. We have not required anyone that enters City Hall to wear a mask. We have not required that because we do have the plastic barriers in place. So.
Good point, Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the only reason I have not pursued the required mask at City Hall is because we do have those barriers in place in City Hall and at the police department.
But so does Publix, and they still have the requirement. So I'm just saying, like, if we're going to make other people do it, then we should do it too, kind of thing, right? Like, we can't expect somebody else to do things that we're not doing ourselves.
I think the point is that with this resolution, we would already be in compliance with it because social distancing can be maintained behind the glass barrier.
Okay. Okay.
It was a point I hadn't, somehow it escaped me in the middle of all the discussion earlier, but yeah, it's right. We're already in compliance, so.
Yes, we are.
I know you're all tired, and we are not going to get passage of the resolution as is tonight, but I am very sensitive, Commissioner Samora, to what you said.
I mean, if you want to come out of here with the resolution that eliminates the mandatory verbiage, it's not that difficult. It's only in there in 3 or 4 places.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, Mayor, that I can remove the enforcement section and carve this up to get something that's fairly simple so that there can be some resolution by this board tonight. And I don't think that's, I think that I can craft that. I think what I would probably suggest is that we pass some, or if the commission wanted to, pass some resolution,
Right.
table the item to the next meeting so that if there's any changes to the resolution, if there's any issues that anyone has with the language, that they could be changed. If potentially commissioners might change their mind, since the next business day is still 3 or 4 days away, but we have a meeting scheduled for Monday. So if you wanted to bring it off the table on Monday, you could. So if anybody's changed their mind with more information, that would be okay. If no one's changed their mind and they don't like the resolution, you could amend the resolution on Monday if you wanted to. But I think it seems to me that there's probably a consensus that the whole commission wants to do some sort of resolution today, and that if anything can be done, it might be done in the future, is what I'm kind of hearing. And so if you table the issue, you can leave it on the part of the issue on the table and still have a resolution that comes out of it.
Mayor, I do have a suggestion. Building upon Commissioner Samora's suggestion and Vice Mayor Koska's responses, and looking at the resolution, I might make a motion to approve it, removing the word mandatory from the title, and in section 2, removing the word shall and replacing it with should, and also removing section 4, the enforcement provision.
I'll second your motion.
Could I ask a legal question? Then would we need it ratified by the county?
No, it won't require ratification if it's just a resolution with no enforcement.
Good point. So I'd amend my motion to remove the reference to the need for ratification. Mayor, are you seconding that amendment to the motion?
Yes, I'm seconding your motion and your amendment.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, could you
read out
repeat?
again? It completely cut out on my phone here at my computer with the connection. Could you read the motion for me?
I can restate it. It was a motion to approve the resolution with the following amendments. First, removing the word mandatory from the title. Second, in section 2, removing the word shall and replacing it with the word should. Third, removing section 4 on enforcement. And 4, removing section 5 related to ratification.
What word are we using instead of mandatory?
It's just being removed in entirety. That's really only relating to the title anyway. The meat of the ordinance lies with the word shall. So by removing the word shall to the word should, it's a strong, strong recommendation, like you've wanted.
And Commissioner George, can I maybe make one more recommendation? The title of section 2, face coverings required, maybe just strike through required?
Sure. I'll,
And strongly
amend-
recommended.
That's strongly recommend, okay, I missed that.
Right.
And just to point out that the shall is in section 2A and section 2D.
Yes, that's why I referenced section 2 in its entirety.
Very
So
good.
thank
Thank
you
you.
for putting it on the
No,
record.
thank you. It's getting late.
All right, and I will second all these changes and ask our city attorney to redraft this. We'll vote on it tonight, but redraft it and present it in our Monday meeting for commissioner comments.
Okay. I've kept up, so I will send it a version to everybody from here, but yes, we can have a vote tonight, and then everybody can look at it. If there's any changes, just like we do with minutes, we can fix them on Monday night.
Okay.
And we'll table the underlying issue so we can bring it back up at that meeting.
Commissioner Rumwell, does that address your concerns?
I still like the word strong recommendation. I still want that in the resolution. So the city of St. Augustine Beach strongly recommends. And then I'm okay with the rest if we add strongly recommend.
Are you talking about in section 2?
Yeah, I want to hear the entire ordinance read exactly of what we, because I have so many notes here. So I want to hear what the full motion will be read as, and with the word strongly recommended. I'd like to have that in there.
Do you mean you would like our city attorney to read the sections that will be changed, that he intends to change? Would you like them read tonight for you?
Well, I'd like to hear what we're voting on in the complete form of what we're going to vote on. I want to hear the verbiage of exactly how it sounds.
Okay, I mean, the entire document is a 4-page Word document. It would I can email it to everybody because I believe I have kept up with all the amendments everyone was trying to make. So if you would like for me to do that, I can do it. I can read the sections that were changed. Or I can try to start reading the whole thing, and I will. I'll be happy to, but I don't want to waste the commission's time. I want to make sure that's what you guys want me to do.
We've never gone through having to read it out loud. I mean, I've numbered the amendments. Maybe, Commissioner Remmerl, are you trying to state you're just not comfortable voting on it? I think that might be more efficient if we just make that clear. If that's your position, that's, whatever you want to do, but let's just be efficient on it.
Where would you put the word strongly recommended, Mr. Attorney?
I put the word strongly recommended after your amendment. I'd suggest putting it in the title. So Resolution 220-22, a resolution. Oh goodness, I hope I haven't screwed up. Okay, I don't think I have. I'll double check. But anyway, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of St. Augustine Beach, Florida, providing for strongly recommended indoor use of face coverings in response to continued spread of coronavirus disease 2019. All the same whereas clauses, except for we amended the ones that referenced the county. Down in the definitions, we've made the references that the shields may be made of other substances other than just cloth. Down in section 2, the title of section 2, face coverings, it now says face coverings strongly recommended. A says every person working, living, visiting, or doing business in the city of St. Augustine Beach should wear a face covering in an indoor location other than their home or residence when not maintaining social distancing from another person or persons, excluding family members or companions. B says nothing herein.
I got the rest of the notes here. I just wanted to make sure that my notes matched up. That's all.
Yep.
I'm good with. I could look at that.
Okay. Then I'll stop there.
I could live with that.
And I am glad we could get it to this point.
And we have a motion and a second, and I think we are ready to call for a vote on amending the resolution to strongly recommend and our city attorney to make those corrections for us that we've discussed.
And leave the item tabled in case there's any questions on at the next meeting of adjustments to the resolution.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, we're ready for a roll call vote.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Costa,
Yes.
Commissioner George.
Yes, but I'm really unclear as to why we're tabling it. I mean, I thought it was a motion that I made, and this is going to make it be so. If the idea is it'll come back for further tweaking, that's fine, but I think the message needs to occur immediately.
No, to be clear, yeah, it would basically split it in two. You make a carbon copy, one of which is the resolution. That passes tonight. The tabling just leaves it on so that you can pull it off the calendar to address it on Monday without further notice, because right now it's a noticed issue. If we wanted to put it on the agenda for Monday or Tuesday, it would be an issue. If we leave it on the table, we can bring it off the table, and it still could be brought back up for reference again.
Okay, so it being on the table, then we could also initiate the first draft of an ordinance on using the same structure with the enforcement fines and all that at the meeting, correct?
Yeah, I have to review the notice requirements for that, so I don't know that we've met those for that first meeting, but that would be something you could direct us to do. We could start the process at that point. You would be unlimited in the ability to start the process or keep the process going if you decided to do something different.
I'd like to have an ordinance draft to consider at Monday or Tuesday's meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner George, did you?
Yes, that was a yes. Sorry for the interruption, Beverly. I know that can confuse the minutes. I apologize, but that's a yes.
That's okay. Commissioner Rumwell,
Yes.
Commissioner Samora.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, we have no further agenda items or anything to discuss. I think we are talked out, and so I will.
Mayor?
Yes?
Mayor, I'm sorry, I'm so vocal tonight. I apologize, but I just want to, since now we're outside of the vote, I just want to make it clear, we had a pretty good consensus of 3 of us moving forward. I just want to make sure that there is clear message to the city attorney that to the extent we meet the noticing standards, I want the agenda item so that we can consider an ordinance, which would only require a majority, on this issue on the agenda. And I just want to give the opportunity to any commissioner who would object to such a thing appearing on the agenda, the opportunity to speak up or else support it or whatever, so that it's clear direction to staff. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Taylor, you're.
No, I'm prepared to start drafting the ordinance. That's not a problem. Without
Okay.
contrary, that's what we'll begin to do, and we will start the process so that we can get it done.
Okay, all right. Commissioners, anything else? All right, then I will call for the vote to adjourn.
Any motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion?
Mayor England,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Costa,
Yes.
Commissioner George,
Yes.
Commissioner Rumwell,
Yes.
and Commissioner Samora.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for working through this the best we can.
Great job. Thank you, Mayor. Good night.
Resolution, I sent it to you, because I've been working on it. I've been keeping track. I think it's right. If they've got any issues, we'll figure that out. But the ordinance is a different ball of wax.